Time to record. So welcome to another great spring day, right, Juniper? She's enjoying herself. We have ducks in the pond that she's chasing, and we're getting down to the lick log, as we say in Arkansas in this class, finishing up the 20th century and into the 21st. We're doing broadcasting this week, and in television, and the internet next week. And then basically by the end of April, we are done with this class. So I'll take a poll. I might just go without a final exam. That way you don't have to worry. That way you're stuck with the grades you got. So we will see how that goes. I was very pleased with the essays. You're really thinking. You came up with some really good examples. I mean, and you did well on the last test. I have to say, I am very pleased with the way this class is going. So I cannot thank you enough for making it worthwhile. So, yes, and Juniper agrees. So, and she will be a whole year old on April 9th, which means she won't be a puppy anymore. You will be an official dog. How about that? Anyway, we're going to have a dog birthday party at Playwash Pint Friday if anyone wants to come. But anyway, talking about so I'm almost done with grading all the essays. Again, you're all doing really good. Okay, we saw the little movie last time, and I really want you to think about that one because it shows the kind of things that happen about how people make a difference and personalities. For what it's worth, the same people who made that movie are doing a piece on PBS this week on Ernest Hemingway, who was all about race and gender and a lot of modern stuff 100 years ago. So I'm enjoying that. Anyway, so we have that. We're talking a little about, again, people and personalities. It's the beginnings of radio and broadcasting. Goes back to, really so much comes back to the telegraph. The idea of instant communication rather than weeks, boom, things happen immediately. It wasn't so much the technology, it was the ideas. So you have the telegraph and then radio waves discovered in the 1880s. And so you put the telegraph and wireless together and voila, you have the beginnings of radio.
Because your passion never runs out, you deserve monthly income that does the same. Guaranteed growth in any market and guaranteed monthly income for life when you retire.
With this telegraph, a device invented way back in the mid-1800s, I can communicate with you, even if you're hundreds of miles away. I can update you on stock prices, or the movements of enemy troops, or who's going to the next week on RuPaul's Drag Race. What's harder to do is make you laugh, tell you a long story, sing you this metal song I wrote, or show you this hilarious cat who's terrified of this toy rabbit. It's adorable, trust me. For that more emotional audiovisual mode of communication, let's ditch the telegraph and leverage some basic scientific discoveries about sound, light, and electricity made during the 19th century. The telephone, invented in the 1860s and 70s, took personal communication to the next level. Both Scottish-Canadian inventor Alex.
Yeah, we went through that. And then we'll talk about movies next week. But let's jump into radio. Okay, here we go.
Reels of film. Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell predicted the existence of radio waves back in the 1860s. But German physicist Heinrich Hertz discovered in 1885 that a wire carrying an electric current will radiate or give off electromagnetic waves when it's swung back and forth. That is, he made an antenna. Hertz researched the waves that antenna gave off, becoming the first person to show in an experiment how to make and detect electromagnetic waves. His work led directly to the radio. Today, we measure the frequencies of electromagnetic waves in units called hertz. Radio waves, the longest type of electromagnetic wave, are measured in kilohertz, megahertz, or gigahertz. Inspired by Hertz's research, a young Italian inventor-engineer named Guglielmo Marconi worked in the 1890s on how to send telegrams wirelessly. Many people were interested in wireless communication, but it was Marconi who first developed a working system. At home in Bologna, he sent and received the first radio signals. Soon after, Marconi traveled to Britain to commercialize his system. By 1899, he sent the first wireless telegraph signal across the English Channel. And by 1901, he was able to send a single letter, S, across the Atlantic Ocean from England to Newfoundland, Canada. In this humble, sibilant way, radio was born. And so Marconi won the Nobel Prize in 1909. In fact, Nikola Tesla developed a working radio system even before Marconi, but it was Marconi's that took off commercially. That process did take a while. Regular radio broadcasts.
I feel sorry for Tesla. If you remember, he invented alternating current that we use on the electrical grid, but Edison had the electric company, so he got the credit. And here we are, Tesla with the radio again. He just can't catch a break. That illustrates again how much personalities and marketing makes a difference.
Began in 1920 in Pittsburgh at the 100-watt station KDKA, and the British Broadcasting Corporation created the first radio network in 1922. Radio broadcasts soared in popularity and became profitable thanks to advertising. By 1936, 3/4 of American households owned a radio. Unlike a telephone, a radio worked without laying expensive copper wires, so this invention and the automobile connected cities to rural areas and changed how people consumed music and sports. Radio also became a tool of political propaganda and an indispensable way of communicating important news.
Yep. That's, you're sitting, and we talked a little about that in the last little video. You're sitting in your house in Dunlap or Cleveland, and you're hearing stuff from all over the world. And that just blows your mind.
The greatest example of this occurred on October 30th, 1938, when Orson Welles directed an adaptation of H.G. Wells's novel, The War of the Worlds, in which terrifying Martians invade Earth and subdue humanity. Some people didn't understand that this was a drama. Maybe they flipped on midway through and mistook the realistic radio announcements for actual news, causing a panic. As radio was taking off, television was invented and built on the infrastructure that was supporting it. And like radio, TV would take a long time to move from prototypes to commercial networks. Numerous people contributed to its development, but one name stands out. Scottish engineer John Baird invented a mechanical TV in the early 1920s. He used transparent rods to transmit images of only 30 lines at a time, or pretty low resolution. Baird demonstrated the first televised images in 1924 and moving ones in 1926. In 1928, he transmitted an image of a human face across the Atlantic Ocean. A year later, the BBC began broadcasting Baird's TV system. He even worked on color TV before 1930, a tech that wouldn't become standard until the 1950s.
Well, we're getting into TV, and we'll do that next time. But you can see the basics of this. Anyway, there's some more.
Radio. That old dusty thing that sits up at the front of your car or in the corner of your house. Most of us are too occupied with television, our iPods, or video games to really listen to it. But the impact it has had on our world is immense. It all started in 1873 when James Clerk Maxwell showed mathematically that electromagnetic waves could travel through air. Before long, in 1888, Heinrich Hertz demonstrated Maxwell's theory by demonstrating that someone could produce and detect electromagnetic radiation. Then, in 1892, Nikola Tesla used Maxwell's mathematic findings to demonstrate the sending and receiving of radio frequency energy. He proposed that this method could be used for sending and receiving information. But it was Guglielmo Marconi who built the first wireless transmitter in 1896, which was capable of sending signals up to 1.5 miles. He then proceeded to develop the world's first transatlantic radio communication service between Clifton, Ireland, and Newfoundland in 1901. The next evolution in radio technology was the invention of the spark gap transmitter. This device allowed for the production of the first commercially available radio sets, but the spark gap radios were plagued with problems, mainly electrical interference. These were greatly improved with the invention and production of crystal radio sets. The crystal sets were the first widely produced and widely used radio sets in America. These crystal sets were widely used in most American homes by the 1920s. It was the American family's connection to the rest of the country. This was fantastic, but there was still a problem that needed to be fixed. Up to this time, all radio was being broadcast using AM waves. AM stands for amplitude modulation. But the problem was that AM radio is medium range and is prone to be blocked by urban structures. But in 1933, Edwin H. Armstrong invented FM radio. FM stands for frequency modulation. This type of broadcasting method uses a wavelength that is less prone to static and blockage. It also has a longer range. With the invention of FM, radio only needed one more evolution to become what you know today. That last advancement was the transistor radio. The transistor radio had particular advantages over the old crystal sets. The transistor sets were much cheaper than the crystal ones, used less power, had a smaller size, and had a very long lifespan.
So basic stuff. Back to that. Anyway, ships all had radios just to keep in contact, to use for Morse code. Remember the Titanic? The fact that people were rescued at all was because of the radio. Now, if you remember who was getting the signal back in New York when the Titanic went down, the young David Sarnoff. So we went from that to the idea of broadcasting over a broad area. DeForest, we saw Lee DeForest and Ernest Fessenden in the early 1900s consider just using what we had in a new way. It didn't take any new technology, it's just a new idea. Sarnoff, having that same idea, says, aha, let's take that and let's make some radios so people will want to hear it. Kind of like the iPad. No one knew they wanted to have an iPad until they saw one. Radio was the same way. Radio takes off, phonograph sales go down. 1920, the first American radio station went on the air. 1927 is the beginning of the Federal Communications Commission to oversee radio. Why? Because not everybody could have, let me write that in. Why? Because not everyone can be is a limited resource. So somebody has to oversee who gets to use the radio waves. And so the FCC sets up licensing requirements. Unlike print, print is anybody could set up a printing press, but not everybody can have a radio station. All right, networks. NBC 1926, CBS 1928. I should mention, like in the last video, 1922, the BBC. The golden age of radio, the 1930s and 40s. everything we see on TV today, sitcoms, soaps, cop shows, game shows, they all started on radio. We'll get to this guy, the guy who started radio news, broadcast news, Edward R. Murrow. Every household had one. And yes, your throat was protected by smoking. Advertising. NBC Blue. NBC got so big, the FCC turned it to NBC Red and NBC Blue. NBC Blue became ABC. Garland and Bob. You see, country music, that culture spreads throughout the country. It's not, you know, so. Abbott. Cop shows, Dragnet. Dun, 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 dun. Anyway, you get radio stars, broadcasting stars, all the stuff that we see on TV started off in radio. Seeing how big it was, the politicians got into the act. Beginning of the Depression, everybody just lost their jobs.
From
It
roof
was
to
bad.
foundation, the damage to your home can
You
be
had
devastating
one
from clogged
politician
gutters, leaking roofs,
understanding
and flooded
the
basements.
importance
Protect
of
your entire
broadcasting.
home with Leaf Filter. Leaf Filter's micro mesh screen is guaranteed to filter out everything except for water.
It's protected my home. I love it. Call 833-LEAF FILTER or visit goleaffilter.com for your free estimate and save 15% today.
Okay, it'll start up in a second. Franklin Roosevelt.
When our daughter and her kids moved in with us,
It's bedtime.
she was worried we wouldn't be able to keep up.
Of course we can.
What couldn't keep up was our bargain detergent.
Turns out it's mostly water, and that doesn't work as well on stains.
So we switched back to Tide. One wash, stains are gone.
Kind of like our quiet time.
Don't pay for water. Tide is concentrated with 3 times the active cleaning ingredients. If it's gotta be clean, it's gotta be Tide.
Okay, come on. Anyway, if you remember, there was a radio in every household. He's seeing that. He talks directly to the American people, saying, don't worry, the government is here to help. I don't know why the video didn't play, but he really did the thing. Churchill in England doing something similar. Meanwhile, we have Edward R. Murrow, who started the first radio news, hired by CBS. He was a debater. He had no journalism background, but he had a really good voice. So he really started radio news from scratch. Here, let's give a listen. This worked just before. I had that all queued up. I guess that they're just really,
Murrow is spelled wrong.
yeah, something happened. There, again, copyright stuff, that's what's going on. We talked about copyright. There he is. Edward R. Murrow. Here's what I wanted you to hear.
I can see just that red snap of the anti-aircraft fire.
You're sitting in your house at the radio in the dark, and this is what you hear.
I was up here earlier this afternoon and looking out over these housetops, looking all the way to the dome of St. Paul's. I saw many flags flying from staffs. No one ordered these people to put out the flags. They simply feel like flying the Union Jack above their roofs. No one told them to do it, and no flag up there was white. I can see one or two of them just stirring very faintly in the breeze now. You may be able to hear the sound of guns off in the distance, very faintly, like someone kicking it.
Last week, Senator McCarthy appeared on this program to correct any errors he might have thought we made in our report of March 9th. Since he made no reference to any statements of fact that we made, we must conclude that he found no errors of fact. He proved again that anyone who exposes him, anyone who does not share his...
Now, at this time, we made Murrow a hero. Senator Eugene McCarthy said there were communists in the government, and Murrow stood up to him, which on the one hand, we call Murrow a hero. On the other hand, he was totally biased. McCarthy was a Republican and Murrow was a Democrat. So that kind of bias has always
hysterical
been.
Disregard for decency and human dignity and the rights guaranteed by the Constitution must be either a communist or a fellow traveler. I fully expected this treatment. The senator added this reporter's name to a long list of individuals and institutions he has accused of serving the communist cause. His proposition is very simple. Anyone who criticizes or opposes McCarthy's methods must be a communist.
Yep, anyone he didn't like, he called them a communist. I would say that we have politicians today. If you don't agree with certain politicians on the left, they'll call you a Nazi. And if you disagree with certain politicians on the right, they'll still call you a communist. This is what Murrow was fighting, saying you can agree to disagree.
And if that be true, there are an awful lot of communists in this country. For the record, let's consider briefly some of the senator's charges. He claimed, but offered no proof, that I had been a member of the Industrial Workers of the World. That is false. I was never a member of the IWW, never applied for membership. Men that I worked with in the Pacific Northwest and Western Washington.
And so he's defending himself.
Was an attack on the Institute of International Education, of which I was assistant director and am not.
And he's answering back. Some things never change. Also seeing the power of radio, you had these guys, Joseph Goebbels, controlling all the media in Germany. The irony is Goebbels was half Jewish. And he set up all of these rallies. All the media. posters and art. And just like we talked about with Murrow, making somebody the bad guy. Jude, obviously the Jews. Behind the curtain is the Jews. You know what? I still see that today. When people talk about the New World Order and the secret people and the Rothschilds, it's the same stuff today. Blaming, and George Soros, who's a Jew. Blaming those people, it's the same crap going on today. Big pageantry and rallies, and if you question it, you're a bad person. They knew what they were doing, and they shut out everything they disagreed with. Okay, World War II, we beat those bastards as well as they should. My dad was there. He was a translator for Holocaust victims, and believe me, the Holocaust happened. Anyway, NBC splits, Blue becomes ABC, listenership goes down. Why? Because you have this new thing, TV. So radio, all the TV shows go to TV, all the radio shows go to TV. What's radio? What are you going to put on the air? Music. What kind of music? Rock and roll. And where did rock come from? Come on.
There's my mama done told me
There's where rock and roll came from, y'all. You get music from the Delta. You listen to people who look like that.
Don't let the body low make a fool of you. Tell me.
This man in Woodville, Mississippi, plays and sings the blues as it might have been done in the Mississippi Delta country of the Old South 70 years ago. His heritage is African, but he is a part of America's musical tradition.
I tip my hat and sip it. I said, I hope that.
That's where we got Elvis. Elvis was a white guy who can sing like a black person.
The mountains of West Virginia perform in a style derived from an earlier European heritage, the country music of our pioneer ancestors.
So we're hearing all this new different stuff.
Beginning in the days of slavery, persisting.
So you get that, and then look at all of them together. Temptations, Scruggs, Billy Taylor, Peter, Paul, and Mary, all working together. You get these British guys taking American.
In little more than a
music.
decade, record sales tripled. By 1965, sales hit the 620 million mark in dollar volume, the Big Beat accounting for the lion's share of this.
So you have this new music, youth music. What does the term rock and roll mean? It refers to a sex act. So you have sex, you have black music, you have new ideas, and kids, young people listening to this. Youth culture, different from what you had before. In the 30s, young people and old people all hung out together. In the 50s and 60s, young people started to do their own thing. In the 60s, then radio takes off. Radio comes back, FM comes in because it sounds better and you can listen to the music, even though Armstrong, who invented it, had passed. Top 40, again, new music, rock and roll. NPR starts in 1969. By the 80s, you start another movement, rap and hip hop. Again, music from African American culture. You start becoming aware of people in the inner city. I notice somebody in their essays did something about X-Nas, whatever his name is, the gay black rapper. I mean, who's twerking with the devil. Is that not a good thing? I don't know. Opens your eyes. Again, new ideas. 1980, MTV comes in and you have hair bands because music is supposed to look good. 1990s, internet and satellite radio. And it's still with us today. We call it narrowcasting rather than broadcasting. Often radio stations are looking for a specific audience: country, gospel, urban, Hispanic. It's not reaching everybody anymore. It's reaching narrow audiences, making it fragmented. We're not listening all to Edward R. Murrow anymore. So if different audiences and different backgrounds, we use radio as background. But radio is growing in our news. NPR, which we have at WUTC, is the dominant news and information source on broadcasting everywhere. Still, we have fragmentation, media and radio goes in different directions. Mechanization. A lot of radio is automatic. They don't even need disc jockeys anymore. It's called Jack radio, where you have a guy named Jack who is your robot disc jockey. You know, and so it's harder to make money. It's competition from the internet. We have Sirius radio. Radio is online, but it's still with us. Anyway, quick overview on all of that. There will be a short 1-question test on this or television, and we will talk about television next time. Okay? Questions on anything going on? Okay, dokes. Have a lovely, lovely rest of the day, and we'll talk about TV next time. Have a good one.
Thank you.